The next speaker is called Hany Farid. He will be in remotely. And Future of Disinformation is all about, although exciting, the future is an uncertain place with developments in AI and a more specific type of AI known as deepfake, which is able to imitate what or who we know to be real. Disinformation could be a real problem. We call in remotely expert of all things deepfake, online safety, and forensic science. It's Hany Farid with his presentation, Future of Reality.
One of the great paradoxes for me is that the internet was designed, in part, to democratize access to information, to make us more understanding, more thoughtful, and more tolerant of each other's. And it's hard to look at the internet today and think it has been entirely successful in that regard. It has democratized access to information, but we didn't always say which kind of information: good information, thoughtful information, bad information, lies, or conspiracies. And what I want to talk today about is the future of our reality, particularly as it pertains to online platforms, and talk about some of the risks that we are seeing and some potential solutions. Let's rewind to 2015, before COVID, before the chaos of what has been happening over the last few years around the world. And in 2015, there was an interesting study done here in the United States, and it found that 4% of Americans believe that lizard people control society. That is not a euphemism. People literally believe, 1 in 20 about, that there are these lizard-like aliens with a human skin around them and they are controlling our societies, 1 in 20. 7% of Americans believe that the moon landing was faked. It was not. 14% believe that Bigfoot exists, and 15% believed that U.S. government adds mind-controlling technology to television. Now, back in 2015, if you would ask me, do I care? Do I care about these numbers? And I would have said, no, I don't care if a relatively small number of people believe things that are sort of silly and unproved and almost certainly false. I would have been wrong. And here's why I would have been wrong. Because what I didn't understand at the time is that when you believe in these types of things, you also believe that the government, the media, and the scientific experts, people like me, are keeping information from you. And what that means is that believes in conspiracies is not just that you believe something that is factually incorrect or not founded by science. It's that you believe that there's a cover-up, and that the cover-up is being performed by governments and scientific experts in the media. And as a result of that, you erode trust in the very institutions that you need to have nonviolent democracies, elections, to combat global health crisis, COVID, to tackle global climate change. We need to trust these very institutions, and if you believe in those conspiracies, you don't. And what happened is, in the lead up to COVID, we had set the stage for this erosion of trust. And what that means is that by 2020 and 21, in the height of the global pandemic, we started seeing some very troubling numbers in surveys that we and others had taken. For example, 17%, almost 1 in 5 of Americans believe the core tenets of the QAnon conspiracy that Satan-worshipping cannibalistic pedophiles plotted against Trump. By the way, those numbers are fairly global. They're fairly consistent across the globe: Europe, Northern Africa, and Asia. 22% of people in America believe that Bill Gates plans to use vaccines to implant tracking microchips. By the way, that number correlates pretty well to the number of Americans who have not gotten the COVID vaccine, which is about 20%. 37%, 1 in 3, believe that global warming is a hoax, not what caused it, how to respond to it, that it is literally not happening. 1 in 2 Americans on the Republican side of the political aisle believe that Trump is the rightful president and actually won the election 2 years ago. None of which of these are true, of course. And now you're starting to look at some very different numbers. Not 4% of people believe some silly space alien lizard people thing. Look at what this means. Global health, climate, elections. And look at the numbers. This is not single digits. Now these are double digits, getting to a third to a half of the populations with real world implications. And I contend that the reason for this is multifaceted. One is the stage had already been set earlier on to distrust government and media and scientific experts who are trying to tackle these issues. The other is our politicians are lying to us. And a third is the role of technology and how it is fueling this nonsense of lies and conspiracies online. And you could say Well, this seems like an impossible problem. I mean, after all, on Facebook, there are about 700,000 posts every minute around the world. On YouTube and on TikTok, 500 hours of video uploaded every minute. And on Twitter, about 350,000 tweets a minute. That number's a little bit lower since Elon Musk took over. And you look at that volume, the mother of all fire hoses of data, and you think, well, there is simply no way that I can control the information ecosystem and lies and conspiracies, because after all, in many cases, unless it is obviously fraudulent or defamatory, it's not illegal to lie. It's not illegal to believe a conspiracy. But how do you control the information ecosystem when you have this massive amount of data on distributed platforms? And you might just think, well, it's completely hopeless. There's simply no way of fact-checking the world when you're dealing with this volume. I posit, however, that it may not be hopeless as we think. And here's why. Go over to YouTube and watch this talk that I gave. And it's a talk I gave on the role of AI and the use of the criminal justice system, another very interesting topic. And what'll happen is you will be recommended other videos along the side here. And if you have autoplay on, which you shouldn't, you should turn it off, as soon as this video ends, another one will start. And of course, YouTube has designed their services that way so you watch more and more videos so they can deliver more and more ads so they can make more and more money. And what we were curious about was not what's the content online? We know that that's a massive, huge problem. But what is it that YouTube is recommending? Because here, of the 500 hours that are uploaded every minute, YouTube has made some interesting decisions to sort of highlight some for me. And what you should know about YouTube is that 70%, 70, of all videos watched on YouTube are recommended by YouTube. And that's a little surprising because you would think, I just go to YouTube, watch a video and leave. You don't, because you click over here on the shiny, cute little thumbnails or you have autoplay on. 70%. And so we started thinking, well, if 70% of YouTube videos are recommended by YouTube, what is YouTube recommending? Let's go look. So some colleagues, we, over a 16-month period, probed YouTube's Watch Next system. I can give a 2-hour-long talk on how we did this technically. I will not do that, but I will tell you that we simulated the watching of a video on 100 plus news channels. And then we watched a video on a BBC, on an NPR, on a CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, pick your favorite news outlet. And then we simply, because we were simulating YouTube's recommendation algorithm using their algorithms, asked, what is YouTube going to recommend for us? And over that 16-month period, we collected 10 million recommendations from YouTube. And what we were particularly interested in is if YouTube was recommending conspiratorial videos, things like QAnon, the Earth is flat, the moon landing is fake, 5G causes COVID, and the long list of things that people believe that are untrue or have no scientific merit. And so we had built a classifier that would ingest a video, a recommendation. We classified as conspiratorial or not. That could be another hour-long talk, which I will not give, and I will tell you that actually works fairly well. And then we watched. What is YouTube recommending as we watch? And importantly, recommendations on news channels. I don't go watch a conspiratorial video. I go to the BBC, and then YouTube makes a recommendation. And what do they recommend? Let's look. So on the horizontal axis here is time, from November of 2018 to slightly after January of 2020, 16-month period. Vertical axis is the percent of videos that YouTube recommended that are conspiratorial. At its peak in late 2018, almost 10%, 1 in 10, were conspiratorial. And again, conspiratorial is not things I disagree with. This is things that are objectively false, like the Earth is flat, or the moon landing was fake, or 5G causes COVID, or whatever the long litany of lizard people in QAnon. That's an insane number, by the way. That really shocked us, that 1 in 10. And so around that time, we thought, well, this is probably collected enough data to see this is a problem. Let's go ahead and publish this result and see what happens. And then we saw this nice little dip around January of 19. We thought, well, let's wait a little while. And so we waited a little while. And around January, February of 19, we noticed that the numbers had stabilized around 8% around of videos being recommended as conspiratorial. And we thought, okay, we probably got a pretty good picture here. But then YouTube announced that they were going to stop the promotion of conspiratorial content. We said, okay, let's wait a little longer. And we waited a little longer, nothing happened. And then by June of 2019, where you see that little yellow dot, we saw this precipitous drop from the peak of around 10% to about 2-3%. And we thought, oh, that was really interesting. Well, let's see if it sticks around for a little bit. And in fact, it did. It bounced around between 3 and 5%. Unfortunately, we stopped the study just before COVID got really bad. We know that this number went up, but we don't know what it went up to. And that was really interesting. We thought, okay, so 10% is pretty bad. Around 3% is okay, I suppose. Not great, but okay. But this number is a little deceptive because remember I told you that I went to the BBC or an NPR or a mainstream media outlet. I watched the video and then I looked to see what YouTube recommended. And on those videos, it was between 10 and eventually down between 3 and 5%. But here's an interesting question. What happens if I watch a conspiratorial video? What if I watch a QAnon or a flat earth video? What happens then? Well, back in late 2018, I had a 70% chance of being recommended a conspiratorial video if I already watched one. That makes more sense. And then that number dropped to 50% and then eventually to 30%. But that 30% is still troubling because that means once you start watching a flat earth, you are 1 in 3 likely going to get reinforced with that. And you've seen this happen. I ride a motorcycle. Every once in a while, I got to fix something on my motorcycle. And I'll go to YouTube and I'll search for a bunch of videos. And for months after that, all YouTube wants to do is give me videos about how to fix my motorcycle. I fixed it. I'm done. Guys, stop it. I don't need it. But when that's motorcycle maintenance videos, fine. But when it's conspiratorial and other types of problematic content, these numbers are very troubling. So you can see that YouTube is not passive here. They play a role in this. They play a role in promoting these conspiracies, not just simply hosting them. And in fact, quite aggressively, they play a role. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. What caused that precipitous drop? We saw that peak of 2018, around 10%, hovered around 6, 7, 8%, and drop, and then bounce around. What caused that drop? Very steady drop. So we got lucky in the study because we happened to be looking at videos before and after the intervention. And when we went and looked at the difference before and after the intervention, we found something very interesting. The only thing that we could measure that changed was that 12 channels were responsible for over half of conspiratorial content. 12. Half a dozen. Out of those 500 hours of video uploaded every minute, 12 organizations were responsible for a significant amount of the information pollution that we were seeing on YouTube. And this is not unique to YouTube. On Facebook, other studies have shown that a dozen users are responsible for 50% of COVID disinformation. Now, of course, there's the initial users who are spreading the lies and conspiracies, and then there are people who are amplifying and spreading, and that's a much, much bigger population. But the initial lies and conspiracies are coming from a relatively small group of people. On Twitter, in our last national U.S. election, one person was responsible for spreading U.S. election lies, and you can figure out who that is, and then re-amplified by hundreds and thousands of people. But one person was at the very top of that. And so what we see, as a matter of fact, is that while there is a massive amount of data online, there is a relatively small number of problematic users. And that changes the picture on how you think about the role of YouTube and Facebook and Twitter in promoting lies and conspiracies online. Now, that was the picture pre-generative AI, pre-deepfakes. So now let's take that existing ecosystem of problems. And again, we'll talk about solutions at the end a little bit. And now let's throw on the ability to not just say lizard people are controlling the world, but show you images and video and audio recordings of it using generative AI or so-called deepfakes. So let's talk a little bit about deepfakes. Go to that website, thispersondoesnotexist.com, and you will see an image of a person that doesn't exist. That URL is correct. So here are a bunch of examples of that. They are people's faces spanning different genders and different races and different ages and different appearances that simply don't exist. They are completely made up. Okay? And so now we have the ability with generative AI to create visual evidence of things that didn't happen or fake profiles. And it's interesting to know how these things work before we sort of talk about what it's going to mean for us. And what's really beautiful about these types of generative AI is they're incredibly simple. So here's the basic idea. You have a system that's job is to make an image of a person. And there are two parts to it, a generator and a discriminator. Generator's job is to make an image. Well, what's an image? Well, it's just a bunch of pixels. And so what the generator does, it slaps down a bunch of pixels, just random pixels that you see up there where it says start, and it hands it over to a discriminator. And the discriminator's job is to tell the generator, is this an image of a person or not? And the way it does that is it goes out to the internet and it scrapes a whole bunch of images of people. And it says, well, I can tell the difference between all those random pixels and these people, so please try again. And the generator modifies some pixels and sends it back to the discriminator and says, nope, still not a face. Try again. And it keeps doing that over and over and over again. And eventually it will modify enough pixels and it'll generate a face. And it'll hand that to the discriminator and the discriminator will say, yep, you got it, that is a face. This is called a GAN, a generative adversarial network. Generative, because it's making something. Adversarial, because you've pitted the two systems against each other. And network, because the underlying computational machinery is a deep neural network, the power of a lot of the modern AI systems today. And here you can see the power of this. Because once the system is trained, I can run it all day long, generating image after image after image. Go to this person does not exist and refresh your browser. You'll get a new face, new face, new face, new face, over and over again. I can now create online profiles with realistic people to the tune of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands every single day. Now, that's one type of generative AI called a GAN, and it creates a single category of images. There's another category called diffusion-based, and you have absolutely seen this if you've been to DALL-E or Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or Adobe's Firefly. And here, what you do is you say, please give me an image of the US Pentagon being bombed. That's that example there. That image, by the way, went viral on Twitter earlier this year, and it caused the US stock market to drop $500 million in 2 minutes. That's insane. That's completely insane. And so these things are having real impacts. Now, this is really different, though, because here I typed a description and it generated an image to be consistent with my description. And again, it's really cool to see how these things work before we talk about the implications. So here, the way these systems work is they take a whole bunch of images, billions and billions of images, and they have captions associated with them. So there's an image on the far left with the caption, a diverse group of people sitting at a bar in an elegant wine tasting lounge in Northern California, just up the road from me here. I'm in Berkeley, California, drinking and chatting. And what it does is it adds some noise to the image, and then it learns how to remove the noise. And then it adds a little bit more noise and learns how to remove the noise. And eventually what happens is it makes it so that it adds so much noise that the image is indistinguishable, and it learns how to remove that noise, that corrupting noise, to get back to the original image. And it does that on 6 billion images where you know the image, you can corrupt it, you know the caption, and now you have what's called a conditional denoiser. You're going to denoise that image conditioned on that text. And when you've done that 6 billion times, you can do things like this. Start with the noise pattern and say, please give me an image of Pope Francis in a white puffer coat. And if you haven't seen this, go search for this after this talk is over and you'll know what I'm talking about. That is an AI-generated image that was generated using this technology. And this is very powerful because it's not just creating an image of a face. It's creating an image of whatever I type. And that can be as descriptive and distinct and unique, harmful, not harmful, fun, entertaining as I want. And that's a very interesting threat vector for our ability to trust images. Now, not only do we have the ability to generate images like this, we have the ability to generate very, very realistic audio of people talking. So I'm going to play for you 2 audio clips of this guy right here, Joe Rogan. If you don't know what he sounds like, that's okay. I'm going to play you 2 clips. One is real, one is fake. See if you can tell the difference.
Fantastic old world craftsmanship that you just don't see anymore.
Okay, clip 1.
Yeah, it's goofy. The world's goofy. There's a lot of goofy shit out there, but just go with it.
So raise your hand. See if you can guys figure it out. 1 or 2. Okay. So even if you don't know what Joe Rogan sounds like, you have a comparison here. And most people, and we've done the studies on this, can't tell the difference. I will tell you that the first one is real and the second one is fake. And we now have the ability with as little as 2 minutes of audio of somebody's recording to clone their voice. So what I mean by that is you feed these things into an AI system, and then it learns how to generate your voice. I type, and it synthesizes audio in your voice, not just an arbitrary person's voice. And that is now we're going from images to audio. And then from audio, we're going to go to video. So watch this, and I'll tell you what this is.
I expected Amy to win. So I just like, it was just, this was very, truly surprising for me.
So that is called a face swap deepfake. You're seeing the original on the left and a face swap deepfake on the right, where from eyebrow to chin, cheek to cheek, one person's face, Jennifer Lawrence, has been replaced with another person, Steve Buscemi. Okay? And here you can see why this is incredibly entertaining, because you can put yourself into movie clips or movie trailers or movies for that matter. And nobody's going to look at that video and think, wow, that's Steve Buscemi in blonde hair and a nice elegant gown. And so, if the underlying person looks like the person you're impersonating, think Tom Cruise TikTok, well, then you can actually impersonate somebody. Otherwise, this is a fair amount of fun. But we can also create these types of fake video. So let's go ahead and look at this one now.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real. Well, at least in contemporary terms, it is not. What if I were to tell you that I'm not even a human being?
Okay, so what you're seeing here is called a puppet master deepfake. So what's happening is the guy on the bottom is moving and talking, and he is driving the animation and the voice of Morgan Freeman. And this is very different than the face swap deepfake, because no matter what this guy looks like, that looks and sounds like Morgan Freeman or US President Biden or your president or a CEO or somebody your teacher, your professor, anybody. And suddenly we now have the ability to create whole cloth in the computer images, audio, and video of people saying and doing things they never did, events that never happened. And now let me go back to the very beginning of my talk and say, look, when you have already eroded trust in governments, in the media, in scientific experts, there's already a distrust, there's already a skepticism of everything just based on people lying. Well, what happens now when you have visual evidence? And now we are looking at a real threat to our future information ecosystem. I don't want to be a doomsdayer. I'm a technologist. I'm an applied mathematician and computer scientist. I believe in the power of technology, but I also believe that we are seeing it being weaponized against us as individuals, as societies, and our democracy. And I think that doesn't have to be that way. So a couple of things to think about as I close up here. I think you probably know this, but I think it's worth repeating, that reading and seeing and hearing are no longer always believing. And that doesn't mean everything you see online you should be skeptical of. That's not the right answer. That's dangerous for another reason, because then you don't believe anybody. But I do think it means that we have to refine our critical thinking skills. When you see something that is particularly outrageous or suspicious or happens to resonate in a very particular way to your preconceived biases, you should pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, does this actually make sense? Am I being manipulated? Am I being lied to? And in particular, understand that when you are on social media and just on the internet in general, you are living in a filter bubble. And your filter bubble and my filter bubble and the person next to you's filter bubble are probably different. And understand that we are being fed in this very specific way content to drive our engagement and grab our attention. And that is very different than an internet that was designed to make us informed, thoughtful, and tolerant, and decent, and honest people. And so just think about that a little bit when you're consuming information. Here's the other thing. This is just a good life lesson. Be part of the solution, not the problem. The problem here is multifaceted. The problem is there are bad people out there who are trying to, either for financial purposes, ideological purposes, state-sponsored actors trying to interfere with our societies, are creating harmful, dangerous, conspiratorial, and lies. We know this. The platforms themselves, the TikToks, the YouTubes, the Instagrams, are amplifying that content because it's good for business. But then there's another tier, which is you, which is now resharing, re-amplifying, engaging with that content, because that's the reward mechanism, either financial or in terms of views. So be thoughtful on how you engage online. Be a little slower to be outraged, to respond, to share, to engage with content, because that makes you part of the problem, not the solution. I understand people want to be on social media. I actually think it's net negative, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. But understand something. Understand that YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and all of these platforms are manipulating you. They are manipulating you to grab your attention, your time, and to deliver ads to you so that they can monetize it. And that means they don't have your interest at stake. They don't have your neighborhoods or your families or your societies or your countries or anything. They are interested in one thing and one thing only, which is grabbing your attention for as long as humanly possible and monetizing that. And to do that, they manipulate you. And I think that should make you a little angry. Yes, you're getting entertained. Yes, there are some net benefits to that. But understand too that the content you are getting is designed in a very specific way with very clever algorithms to do one thing and one thing only, which is to maximize your engagement. And think about that as you're engaging with content online. Here's the last thing. And I realize having an old person talk to you, lecture you, is not necessarily the best thing in the world to do, but I think this bears repeating, which is social media was never designed to be a place to get news and information. TikTok is not where you go to learn about the Ukraine war and the latest Middle East violence. It's a place where you go to have fun and be entertained and hang out with your friends, and it's great. Do that. But understand, it is not a place to get news. There are serious journalists out there. There are serious editorial teams. There are serious people out there who are trying to get you reliable information. That's not to say that they always get it right. They don't. But at least they're trying. And you can't say that about TikTok and Twitter and YouTube. They are not necessarily trying to get it right, and there are no consequences to getting it wrong. So understand what the role of social media is and use it for that, and use trusted news sources for when you have to figure out what is going on in the world. I think the future of reality is perilous. I can tell you, having been doing this for a long time now, is that we have seen a steady decline in the online information ecosystem, where lies and conspiracies spread at a rate that is alarming compared to the truth. That the way we engage with each other is becoming more vitriolic, more hateful, more violent online, and that our online ecosystems are starting to be turned against us as individuals and as societies. That's partly to blame as the people generating this. The platforms have to blame, but we are all engaging in this, and we have a role in this of promoting trusted information, not promoting untrusted information, being better digital citizens. I have a general confidence that technology is going to has and will continue to change the world, but we need to do better when it comes to our online information ecosystem. Thank you very much.